My dear friend, have you ever felt your energy being drained without knowing why you walk into a room, and though no one touches you, you leave with a strange emptiness inside? Not everyone notices this, but you with a heart that trembles easily with a gentle light a part of you has been taken. No, this is not mysticism. It is a deep psychological reality. Carl Jung once warned of an invisible mechanism he called the absorption of the soul, when your inner light is swallowed not by fangs, but by the emotional hunger others carry. And the paradox is this: you who long to heal are often the most fertile ground for this process to unfold. Not because you are weak, but because very early you learned to survive by giving yourself away. You were not chosen to be an empath, you were shaped in silence. In the tender years of childhood, when the emotions of others were the hidden storm you had to read in order to remain safe, you trained your soul like a sail against violent winds. And now within your adult body, you still live as that child, vigilant, forever striving to rescue others before they collapse. But who is rescuing you? That question is the beginning of a difficult yet necessary journey, the descent into the shadow realm where the unconscious whispers softly, "Enough. Do not surrender more." Jung once wrote, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In this video, you will be invited to such an encounter, not with another, but with the forgotten fragment of your own being. It is here that true healing begins, not by giving more, but by reclaiming the soul pieces once traded for love. But how do we recognize when we are being drained? How can we distinguish compassion from emotional dependency? And why does our own shadow silently conspire in this exhaustion? In the next part, we will begin to unravel the phenomenon Jung described as psychic vampirism, the feeding upon psychic energy, a process born not of malice, but of wounded bonds left unhealed. Walk with me further. This is not merely knowledge, it is an awakening. There is a peculiar exhaustion that empaths often carry, a fatigue not born of labor, but from seemingly harmless conversations, from relationships that demand nothing, yet drain you little by little, as though your soul were light and someone else is surviving on it. Carl Jung once said, "Where light is, there must also be shadow." This is not merely a spiritual principle. It is a deep law of the psyche, especially for those who radiate light. You, with your open heart, your profound sensitivity, your ability to listen without judgment, become a safe haven for those wandering in the darkness of their own being. But know this: not everyone who steps into the light comes to heal. Some come to absorb, to survive, and gradually you become their anchor, not out of love, but out of hunger. This phenomenon is not just metaphorical. In psychology, we call it psychic vampirism, the feeding on psychic energy. No fangs or magic are required. Only a timely sigh, a pleading gaze, a phrase like, "If it weren't for you, I don't know what it'd do." And suddenly your door opens. Look back. How many times have you entered a relationship only to become the emotional nurse? You cared, you healed, you carried everything, while the other never once chose to change themselves. They only wanted you to stay forever. This is the trap of nurse syndrome, where we define our worth through our ability to rescue others. Slowly, you stop living with joy and begin living in a role. A woman once came to therapy and confessed, "I am no longer myself. I am only someone else's somebody," the girlfriend of the depressed, the daughter of a mother who always blames the friend who listens while breaking inside. She, like so many of us, was caught in the spiral of toxic savior relationships where love becomes duty and empathy becomes burden. The danger is this: those who come to you in their suffering may not intend to harm you. They simply do not know how to generate their own light. And you, in your pure kindness, did the most natural thing: let me help you. But Jung warned, if you keep giving without awareness of boundaries, your light ceases to be a lamp and becomes a meal. When a child grows up in an environment without recognition, they often develop heightened sensitivity as a means of survival. Such a child learns to read unspoken feelings, to soothe the depressed mother, to fill the void of a father unable to show love. And as they grow, they become healers not by choice, but by programming. But what happens when the healer has never been healed? Jung called this the archetype of the wounded healer. They can save others, but carry a nameless wound themselves. That wound makes them deeply empathetic and deeply vulnerable. And if unrecognized, it drives them unconsciously towards souls in need of saving, just to feel worthy. So how do we break this cycle? How do we protect our light without becoming hardened? The answer is not to close your heart, but to learn to open it wisely. Not to abandon kindness, but to practice discernment, a skill Jung saw as essential for spiritual maturity. You have the right to choose who is worthy of touching your light. You have the right to say, I am not your savior. And that does not make you selfish. It makes you responsible to your own soul. If you are watching this and recognize yourself in these words, you are not alone. This is not a judgment. It is an awakening. Share your feelings in the comments, not only to release them, but so we can build a community of people learning to protect their light. Let this video be a space where you are seen not for what you give, but for who you truly are. And now, as you recognize the mechanism of depletion, are you ready to face the shadow within? For as Jung wrote, we cannot escape the darkness by fighting it, but by befriending it. In the next part, we will enter the secret domain of your own psyche, where your shadow silently shapes your choices, your emotions, even the relationships you call love. But is it truly love, or just another way of abandoning yourself? Stay with this journey. The light awaits your return. There is one truth few dare to face. It is the shadow, the unconscious darkness within us that acts as the most subtle accomplice to the suffering we believe others have caused. This is not blame. It is the truth Jung devoted his life to. We are not wounded merely because others trespass, but because we have left the door open from within. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, why do I keep attracting those who need to be saved? Why do I feel guilty when I say no? And why each time I am drained do I blame myself for not being kind enough? The answer lies in a silent pact within your psyche, an agreement you may never have consciously made, but one that was sealed long ago. If I am always needed, I will not be abandoned. And from this pact, your shadow, the immature part of the psyche, quietly scripts your life as a repeating tragedy. Mini hook. What if I told you that deep down a part of you wants to be consumed just to feel worthy? In Jungian psychology, this is called a complex and emotional knot of energy formed from painful memories, especially in childhood. For empaths, it is often the abandonment complex, the sense that unless you are useful, you will not be loved. And like an unconscious magnet, you draw to yourself those who cannot stand alone, because being needed has become your only proof of existence. We see this archetype in dreams. A woman dreams she lives in a house without doors, only windows. Anyone can enter. Anyone can touch. Some quietly steal her belongings. Some simply sit and drain her energy. And she cannot speak, only weep. This is the image of a soul without boundaries, where others come and go freely while the self slowly disappears. Do you recognize yourself in this? Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The shadow is not just the bad part of us, it is the rejected, forgotten part, the part we hid away to be loved. It may be the child once called selfish for protecting their needs. The child who learned to silence themselves to keep the family from breaking. The true self buried deep now, speaking in silence, through chronic exhaustion, draining relationships, and the haunting question, who am I beneath all of this? To heal, you cannot go on painting light over the cracks. You must enter the darkness. You must question the part of you that consented to depletion. Am I sacrificing out of love or out of fear of abandonment? Am I helping, or am I trying to reclaim the worth I was once denied? Am I the healer, or simply afraid of being forgotten if no one needs me? Asking these questions is not easy. They lead to emptiness. But emptiness is the womb of rebirth. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, not as punishment, but as purification, to separate true light from borrowed light. And when you pass through it, you discover something extraordinary. You are still worthy, even when no one needs you. And this is when community becomes essential. Souls on the same journey. They do not need you to be endlessly strong. They do not need you to carry them. They need you fully, truly as you are. If this resonates with you, share in the comments. How has my shadow been guiding me? Or simply, I am ready to bring light to my shadow. These words become guiding stars for others and for yourself. And once you recognize your shadow dialogue with it, befriend it, you reach a deeper door. The door of the self, what Jung believed to be the true center of individuation. In the next part, we will explore, how do you step out of the role of the wounded healer and into a new role, the keeper of the light, as a spiritually mature being? For healing is not about endless giving. It is knowing when to preserve so that the flame burns eternal, not extinguished. Continue on. The door's open. Do you remember the last time you said a deliberate no? That quickening of the heart, but also the surge of power? In that single moment, you were no longer someone's copy, but the first edition of yourself. Let me tell you about someone who once stood on that threshold, not to teach you, but to help you see yourself reflected in her story. She was what many called a savior, always there whenever someone fell into despair. No one knew why, but when she entered a room, people held their breath, not because of her words, but because her presence mirrored the wounds they had not yet faced. But she didn't just tend to others' fractures. She carried the wound within herself as proof that she deserved to exist. Jung called this the pathology of the wounded healer, the one who heals but cannot heal themselves. She could not find herself between fire and empathy, and the cost was steep. Disconnection from her own needs, every breath given to another, left her forgetting to breathe for herself. Emotional dependency, she became a bridge, never an anchor. Exhaustion of life energy, each morning, she awoke not to live, but to fight against disappearing. In one session, she confessed, "I wake up and feel as if I have no body of my own. I am only the echo of what others need from me." This was not the sign of greatness. It was the mark of inner collapse when the boundaries of the self dissolve, and you live in the shadow of desires that were never yours. So how do we reconcile with the true self? How do we stop playing healer when we ourselves are in need of healing? Jung would say individuation begins the moment you dare to enter into conflict with yourself, when you break the unconscious pact that says, "If I do not give myself away, I will not be loved." That is the first step out of the shell of being needed and into the territory of selfhood, where you preserve your light without trading it for the old currency of emptiness. Go deeper for a moment. Imagine a candle. If you expose it to constant wind, the flame dies out. If you shut it in completely, it suffocates. The only way to keep it burning is balance, giving it just enough air, shielding it from harsh winds, allowing it to burn in its own way. In the same way, love and compassion do not require self-destruction. They require boundaries. They require loving yourself as your most intimate companion. Now imagine her, the woman who once only lived for others, beginning to recognize her own needs. She begins to say, "I need a moment not to be the rescuer. I need silence without guilt." And when she speaks it, she hears a voice both strange and familiar, the voice of her forgotten self returning. It is in that very moment when you dare to step yourself out of the background, when you declare, "This is me. And this way too, I am worthy," that you enter the realm of emotional independence. Not loneliness, but wholeness. It is the place where love does not require reciprocation to be real. And if you are listening and a question rises within you, how can I say no without guilt? Know that you are not alone. Share in the comments a short reflection. The first time I truly said no was when, or I am learning to protect my light by. These are not criticisms, but connections, threads that help make this community a safe place for each soul's awakening. And from here, as the light of the self begins to flicker back, the door opens onto a new journey, not only protecting your light, but learning to give it in ways that keep it aflame, not an endless reservoir to be drained. In the next part, we will step into a vital practice, how to distinguish compassion from emotional dependency so that healing does not become a burden upon yourself. Together, we will uncover Jung's insights about the thin veil between love and sacrifice in the sacred art of setting boundaries when you have a vast heart. Stay with me in this journey, for before your light can shine upon the world, it must first be found nourished and safeguarded within you. Sakatoridina, have you ever heard a whisper inside? Why do I always heal others while I remain torn apart within? That one small question is enough to pierce the shell of maturity you've built and invite you into another world, the world of soul rebirth. Let me tell you about someone I see as a symbol of the final turning point in healing. She was once the light for so many friends in despair, lovers collapsing, colleagues restless. But one night she broke down in tears, not for anyone else, but for herself. She said, "I no longer know who I am." In that moment, she was no longer the healer. She was the one lost to herself. Jung called this the threshold of the shadow, the place where the disowned parts of the soul, the regions we refuse to see, finally strangle the healer. And from this bitterness begins individuation, the return to the true self. Do you dare to face what frightens you? To ask, "If I no longer heal anyone, who then am I?" On that path of return, nothing is more vital than psychological boundaries, those invisible lines between self and other between helping and self-erasure. Jung emphasized boundaries are the foundation of emotional maturity. They are not walls of isolation, but the conscious power to choose who may enter. Imagine holding a candle in your hands. Bring it too close to others, and the endless chill of their need extinguishes it. Hold it too tightly, and it suffocates. Boundaries are what allow the flame to live gentle sovereign, neither withering nor consumed. And from these subtle boundaries, your true light emerges. No longer a cotton swab absorbing others' pain, but a flame that guides with rhythm, knowing when to dance and when to rest. More practically, you might ask, how do I say no without guilt? How do I set boundaries without losing compassion? I invite you to share in the comments just a sentence or two like, the first time I said no, it felt lighter than I imagined, or I realized I can love others without becoming their savior. Small words that illuminate not only your path, but the path of a community reclaiming its light. And here Jung's reflection becomes clear, the wounded healer. They heal because they were once broken. They empathize because pain has wrapped them too. But the magic begins when they befriend the wound instead of hiding it. When they are no longer afraid of being called selfish for not rescuing, they reclaim the light they thought they had lost. And if you are thinking, I'm not a therapist, how does this concern me? You are mistaken. Jung insisted the wounded healer is a human archetype not limited to psychologists. As parents, friends, lovers, colleagues, anyone who hides their own wounds, by tending to others, we are all healers, each given the chance to awaken. The world does not need more wounded healers, it needs healers who have healed. And that is you if you are willing to return to yourself, to witness that first tear shed for your own soul and to say, I am not perfect, but I am worthy of love. When you can do this, you heal not only yourself, but you set a new standard for luminous love. A love that is abundant, but not depleting, where every flame burns uniquely yet in harmony. So I ask you, are you ready to take one more step on the path of individuation, where there is no longer fear, but deep understanding? Where recovery no longer means endless sacrifice, but the lifting of yourself into wholeness. In the next part, we will explore concrete practices for sacred yet ordinary boundaries as simple as saying, I need rest without apology, or choosing silence in the face of draining demands, a style of love that is unconditional yet bounded. The journey continues and the flame within you waits to be kindled anew. Let me tell you a story of someone I call the one who stood before the mirror of the self. She once believed I am the reason people can stand, until the day she faltered before the mirror, realizing her reflection had grown thinner than the light others demanded from her. No one knew how much of herself she had surrendered, only that she had lit flames for others without leaving a single ember for herself. According to Jung, this is the archetype of the wounded healer, and such light, if it does not return to the self, is not salvation, but depletion. Wittgenstein once remarked that those who choose the work of healing often carry their own deep wounds. What drives us to heal others, is it not perhaps the abandonment we once suffered and the mistaken belief that tending to others would soothe our own shock? But what if you came to see that healing others does not require burning yourself as fuel for their pain? Jung reminds us healing is not something you do for others. It is a journey you undertake with them. The key is to learn boundaries, not to shut the door, but to keep enough light within so it can continue to shine. Psychological boundaries are like invisible miracles, gentle but strong enough to keep you from being swept into the storm of another's energy. Without them, you are like a field battered by endless rain. Eventually, the stalks break and no one finds shelter in your shade. In daily life, these boundaries sound like I cannot right now, spoken with sincerity, or I am tired, I will listen later. Not rejection, but preservation, protection of tomorrow's strength. If this feels unfamiliar, try sharing in the comments. The first time I said no was, and to my surprise, it felt lighter than I imagined. In sharing, you are no longer alone. Your single sentence may be the spark that warms someone else who is lost. Do you realize that when you stop rescuing others, automatically you give them the chance to learn how to heal themselves? And as we move forward, remember Jung taught that wounds cannot heal by being hidden, only when they are made conscious. To say I need this space for myself is not selfish. It is the brave act of stepping into the circle of healers who have healed rather than healing from emptiness. In the next part, we will explore the most sacred practice, how to reclaim the soul fragments you abandoned by overhealing without return. It begins in silence, not to save another, but to find yourself again. And when you do, giving is no longer sacrifice. It is presence. Stay with me. For true light does not fade when you guard it. It burns brighter because it belongs to you before it belongs to anyone else. Have you ever heard a whisper inside like the last flame still burning quietly? You are not only the one who stands between worlds, you can become yourself. Just one small phrase like that can shift your vision from I am carrying it all to I am reclaiming myself. Imagine a woman, let's call her N.A., who once believed her existence only mattered when she was saving someone. Every uninvited conversation, every demanding request pulled her further down a bottomless well. She once wept not because anyone abandoned her, but because she realized she had been abandoning herself in order to keep existing. Jung described this as identification with the role of the healer without firm boundaries. Empaths did not just heal others, she forgot that she too needed healing. When a healer loses touch with their own self, they trade compassion for survival, and their light begins to fade. But what if you understood that to preserve the flame within you, you must learn to withdraw deliberately, not out of selfishness, but out of self-care? Jung uncovered a psychological truth: the shadow, the dark counterpart of the ego, often drives the actions of those who give unconsciously. When light leaks without replenishment, the shadow thrives, pulling you into patterns of giving to feel worthy rather than opening to receive worth. That is why the practice of inner stillness, together with boundaries, is the most potent form of healing. You do not need to be a candle burning at both ends. You can reposition your soul between light and shadow, between giving and receiving, between serving and living authentically. If you are reading this, perhaps your heart has also grown weary from loving too long, and now quietly asks, can I love without being consumed? The answer lies in conscious self-awareness, in allowing yourself to be fragile without needing to be endlessly strong. A call to community. If you have had even a small moment where you pause to care for yourself, share it in the comments. I began with 1 minute of breathing for myself, or I took 1 day to rest without doing anything for anyone. These small testimonies are sparks of a new light, unbreakable, because they are born of peace, not self-destruction. Do you see now that you are not only a giver, you are the steward of your own light? When you begin to see yourself as a sacred ecosystem of energy, not a healing machine, you discover an inner force individuation. Jung saw this as the process of becoming yourself, nothing but yourself, not defined by others' validation, but recognized by the sheer fact of your being. And here's the beauty: if you think this process only applies to therapists or psychologists, you miss the most human truth. We are all healers if we are willing to listen to the self. A healed soul does not need to prove anything. It only needs to exist. When you finally step beyond unconscious dependency, you realize you exist not because others need you, but because you know you are worthy of peace. And in that peace, you can love without drowning. You can pause without shame. You can say enough and still be accepted. And from this place, the final door opens the path of nurturing your inner flame with deliberate compassion, so you are not an empty reservoir, but a living source of continuity. In the next part, we will step into practice from speaking a no without explanation to declaring I deserve peace. Stay with me to the very end, where your light is no longer a fragile candle, but an inner fire that pierces the night, giving not only light, but warmth. When the last candle stops trying to illuminate the whole room, it discovers this: the most beautiful light is the one that knows how to return to itself. And you who have walked the long road of empathy, of being drained, of silent hours when no one saw you, you can pause, not to be forgotten, but to remember yourself. Carl Jung once said, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. If you are reading these words, it means you have already come far enough to know healing is not found in being understood by someone else, but in daring to face your own being, both light and shadow, and to say, I am no longer the one who chases after others. I am the one who turns back to embrace myself. You don't need to become extraordinary. You only need enough courage to protect what was once taken from you, with love, with boundaries, with silence that no longer frightens you. That is the moment you are no longer just a healer. You become a channel for yourself first, and then for others. Share below a moment in this video that made you feel, yes, I've been there. Not to showcase your pain, but to reconnect with souls who need to know they are not alone in this awakening. Don't be afraid to write because someone out there may be waiting for your words as proof that they are not walking in solitude. And if you feel that something in this video has stirred you, don't forget to subscribe. Not because I need a number, but because I believe a community is forming a space where light is preserved, not consumed. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Return to yourself not as a victim of empathy, but as one who has learned to keep the flame alive in the wind. I'll see you in the next video where we'll explore how to walk through silence into depth. Do not live only to heal someone else. Live to be yourself, whole, awake, and luminous.